Okay, welcome YA Wednesday listeners and watchers. We are super excited today because we have Gaes here to do an interview. Her newest book, Consider the Octopus, will be dropping on April 5, 2022, and she is here to talk to us about her writing and about her newest book. So welcome, Gaes.
Thank you. And thank you so much for having me. It means a lot to me.
Yes,
Appreciate
we're
it.
thrilled to have you here. So why don't you tell us just a little bit about yourself as a writer and how you got to this point? Many of our listeners and our watchers are curious about author stories. So just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks. So I have one of those long author stories that can often lead me down that path of years. So I'll try not to do that. Um, but hopefully the short version of it is that when I was a kid and a teen and a young adult, I wrote all the time, mostly poetry and short stories, but always took creative writing classes in high school and college, but never, ever, ever thought about or dreamed about being an author. It was not even something that I would have considered. So after college, I went to law school and became a practicing attorney, and still am, still take cases occasionally when they come to me. But in my early 30s, when I had my first son and was pregnant with my second son, I really started to miss that creative side of me. I was doing a ton of legal writing, but I wasn't doing creative writing. And so I decided to just see if I could write 100 pages of something. I remember setting that number and thinking it was impossible. And then when I got to 100 pages, I was like, oh, maybe I can finish this. And that was actually a piece of women's fiction. And that eventually, in the short version, got me agented with a New York City agent, but never got published, nor did the second piece of women's fiction that my agent loved even better get published. And then my kids, who were 8 and 10, and I was reading aloud to every night, were the ones who I decided to write a piece of children's literature for. Didn't know a designation between YA or middle grade, just wanted to write a book for them. And that became The Pull of Gravity and sold to a publisher. So that was a very short version of a very long story.
That's great. And it's really good that you're talking about writing not just as writing fiction, but also you were doing a lot of other writing in your professional life. And then you
Yeah.
were immersing yourself in the children's writing when you were reading to your kids.
Yes, yes, very true. And
So,
I often say that I don't know that I could have written a novel had I not been a trained legal writer,
mhm.
because it gave me a certain level of both patience and the ability to understand that I needed to lay a foundation and to tell a story, especially the kind of legal writing I was doing at the time after I graduated law school was family law and divorce law. And it
Mhm.
was the one area of law where the lawyers who I worked for really wanted your briefs and motions to tell a story, a colorful story, versus just sort of just the facts, ma'am.
Mhm.
In family law and divorce law, you really had to tell a story. And so it was a running joke in the big firms that I worked for, because the senior lawyers would line up to have me write their motion papers, because they would be like, Gay tells such a good story. So I don't think if I didn't do that lawyering writing, I would have ended up being able to get my brain to figure out, because I don't have an MFA and I'm not trained in that way, to sort of figure out how to really make sure I'm laying the foundation and building the story.
Okay, I love it. So, so tell me a little bit about how you function as a writer. Do you
I
have
don't.
a routine that you follow? Oh, that's so comforting for me to hear, because I wish I could say I follow a routine, but it can be a little dicey some days, but what patterns have you noticed about yourself this
None, no.
morning?
I mean, we were saying a little bit before we got on this formal interview that the last couple of years have really changed my um, writing life, my adult life, my functioning life, my parenting life, for everybody, it's changed so much. Um, in many ways. And so I would say that my writing life has been incredibly haphazard
Mhm.
the last couple of years. And I've also struggled to get my last couple of manuscripts published.
Okay.
And so that has also factored into where my brain is at in terms of staying with something.
Mhm.
And I've taken on some other creative endeavors, and they have been more conducive to pandemic creativity for me. So if you went back pre-pandemic, I would tell you that I pretty much wrote every day that I could. That my writer's life is definitely, involves a morning of marketing my past books and trying to do outreach on my past books before I sit down to focus on my forward-looking projects. And I would try to write every day. Having said that, I do not like it when, we talk about, well, if you're a real writer, you write every day.
Mhm.
First of all, there's no females that are mothers or parents that have ever said that. Because when you have kids,
Amen.
right? So, all the more power to you, but I'm guessing it was a man who said that. um, but also life gets in the way and stuff gets in the way. And so I don't believe in, that you have to write every day to be a writer, but I definitely think that it's important to try to write
Mhm.
as much as you can and to have a consistent sort of, schedule of writing.
I like to think about writing as so much more than just sitting down at the keyboard too.
Great point.
For for many for many weeks when I was writing my dissertation, for example, like I felt like I was stuck and I would take walks and I would go to thrift shops and maybe I would stop at garage sales and I would feel so guilty because my kids were in daycare during that time. And I had a friend who's also who writes a lot and she just said, "No, you're still writing
That
when
is
you're
where the
doing that."
best writing
And
takes place.
yeah, yeah. So maybe you could tell me a little bit about what feeds your writing. Is there anyone who's part of your community in terms of writers that helps you keep thinking about writing?
So
And
I just want to add first that I'm an avid open water swimmer. So if you read
oh,
like past interviews of me, I will talk about like you're walking my swimming, and I do my best
wonderful.
writing in the water. And the hard part is getting from the water to the back to the computer and the page and having it have that same resonance that it had while, while I was swimming. I do like mnemonics and stuff to remember it while I'm out there. So
I love that.
yeah. So in terms of my writing community, it's pretty small in terms of other people who inspire me. I'm a bit of a loner, which I would never describe myself really that way, but in terms of I'm not one of those people that ever was in a large writing group. I don't there are a lot of reasons for that. But I have a couple of close writing friends, like my friend Amy Fellner Dominy, who has a bunch of YA and some middle grade and some picture books out now. And she and I will bounce ideas off of one another, and we'll read for one another and we'll brainstorm with one another. So she is probably my closest writing friend in terms of that constant contact where we'll call each other up and say, I'm 30 pages into something and I don't know where I'm going with it. Can I give you some background and hear you out? And we'll trade chapters. And she's fantastic for that. And then there's Nora Rowley Baskin, who is my co-writer on Seven Clues to Home,
Yeah.
and then Consider the Octopus. And one of the reasons we started writing together was what I was talking about in the beginning, but especially after the 2016 election. We
Mhm.
had become friends. We both have 9/11 9/11 books, and we became friendly through those books. And after the 2016 election, both of us were lamenting the fact that our creativity felt like it had dried up and disappeared, and we didn't know how to write in this world, in this place, in under these circumstances. And so we started saying maybe we should write together, and maybe just egging one another on. If you and the pressure of wanting to satisfy my role in a collaborative project. So if you pass something on to me, I everything else aside, I will get my chapter to you, and vice versa. And that turned out to be just a phenomenal collaboration. We actually wrote 4 manuscripts together, only 2 of which have been published or are being published so far. But
That's terrific. And I feel like I'm a kindred spirit with you, because I have found that my own professional productivity depends so much on writing with someone else. So I'm not as much of a solo authored person as I am a group authored person for that reason. You know, I really find being accountable to a small group or to another person is best.
yeah, yeah. Especially during hard times, I think it's really nice to be inspired by
Yeah.
someone on a daily basis. And so it was really funny after we finished 7 Clues together, which we wrote very quickly, like shockingly quickly, and then we revised it for a couple of weeks, and then we sent it to our agents because we each have separate agents. But we had written it so fast, we couldn't sleep, we couldn't breathe. She would send me a chapter and it would just be like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And I would immediately write my Lucas chapter. But when we had finished that, we had also written for a year before that a YA together that has not been published. And as much as collaboration can be wonderful, it can also be, stressful, and you don't have the same control and difficult. And so when we finished 7 Clues, I was like, okay, no more projects together for a while. And then we came up with the idea for Consider the Octopus. And I was like, let's think about it, but let's not do it now. And she said, okay, but I'm just going to send you like a chapter. And then there it went.
Right.
And that kind of inspiration is priceless.
Yes. Well, and you have to hit it, right? You have to hit it
Yeah.
when it comes.
Yeah.
So aside from working with others, are there books or other things that you find inspiring as a writer? Are there favorite authors or things that you turn to that get things moving for you?
I have all of those things like everybody else. But I don't think that, like, of course I read a book and I think it's brilliant, and then it both inspires and frustrates and terrifies me. I'm one of these people, if I read a book that I really love, then I'm like, I will never be that kind of writer then, oh, let me go write like that. It's more like I have no writing when I read something like that. So I don't know, for me personally, if other books are my inspiration. I get more inspired by just stories people tell me in life, things that happen in real life, or the what ifs that pop into my head about things that happen in real life. So I think more often than that, that is how or just trying to grapple with my own fear, loss, concerns. And when it gets big enough, I start thinking maybe I should write a story about this and try to grapple with it through story. And I think that's most often where I'm drawing my inspiration for writing from. What is it that I need to tackle? Because it's getting too big to keep it here. So let me write something about it.
That's what makes our writing real.
Yeah.
When it comes from that place.
Yeah. Yeah.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about Consider the Octopus?
So I wish I had a cover to hold up for you. I actually can hold up a little cover.
A
I will
baby
tell you,
cover.
so these are my can you see that okay? I know
Yes.
the light is on.
And it's adorable. When I post the interview, I'll add the cover to the beginning. So
Awesome. Thank you. So I actually thought that my author copies might be here today. I bet you they arrive as soon as we hang up from the interview,
course.
because they're supposed to be here any day. So it would be really fun to hold up the cover, but it's an awesome cover, and the jacket itself that goes into the, folds of the interior cover they're gorgeous. Because consider the Octopus takes place at the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, at the edge of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And so when you open the jacket, there are Laysan albatross, which are the birds that are on an island called at a wildlife refuge called the Midway Atoll. And those birds are eating plastic, and their stomachs are getting full of plastic. And so, but they're also fluffy and white and adorable, and we want to save them. And so there are albatross all over the jacket copy, and it's just the jacket cover, and it's gorgeous. But basically, consider the Octopus is an environmental farce and comedy of mistaken identity that takes place when my main character, Jeremy J.B. Barnes, gets sentenced by his mom, who's the chief scientist aboard the Oceana 2, to spend the summer with her out at the edge of the garbage patch. Last place on earth JB wants to be. He's the class cut up. He's a football player. He has a brother and sister who are older at college who love science, and that's not him. So he goes on to the Oceana 2, and he gets tasked, because he's good at the internet, at reaching out to a bunch of global scientists and sending them a pre-canned, pre-written letter that's all been set. Just find these people and mail out this invite to them. We are having an emergency global summit aboard the ship in order to get publicity so we don't lose our funding and can continue our mission. Among those scientists that JB has to invite is one Dr. Sidney Miller, who is the marine biologist at the Monterey Bay Aquarium. And he sends him his invite, which goes instead to a Sidney Miller 12-year-old podcaster who has an octopus avatar on her podcast. And she, not wanting to go to summer camp, conspires with her Nana to board the Oceana 2, which at the opening of Consider the Octopus, JB realizes his mistake and doesn't know what to do. And so he lets her on board. And the way that this can happen is, in addition to the scientists, there's also a group of semester high school kids who are coming aboard the ship for the same week. So they're using this whole thing as a publicity thing. And Sydney shows up. She doesn't look like a high schooler, so they have to figure that out as well. But JB, wanting to save face, makes the split-second decision that he's letting her on board. She becomes a stowaway. They have to hide her, all while deciding that we want to also help try to save the mission and start learning about the environment and cleaning up garbage themselves. It's adorable.
Can't wait.
I would like to say that we got a starred review from Kirkus, which is amazing, because we were worried because it's a comedy, and it was really important for us for it to be a comedy, that the same way comedies aren't always recognized in film for their quality, that people might not recognize how hard we worked to also make this a beautiful and poignant literary story about environmentalism, which it is too. So we were really excited about our starred Kirkus review. We also have our school library journal review, and it reads like a starred review. They loved it, called it hilarious. So we're really excited about it, as you can tell.
I'm excited too. I think that it's interesting you bring up the plot line as well as the audience of this book, because I do feel that this particular age group feels so pressured to try to do something to change. And so it sounds like your goal in writing this book was really to allow some room for humor, so that, I mean, what is it? Stephen Colbert says, like, when you make people laugh, they're no longer afraid, right? So like, it's an opportunity to help young readers laugh and engage in a plot, while also in the back of their minds think about what their impact could be.
Yes. Yeah, I really feel like collectively we have lost our sense of humor. And I feel like laughter is the best medicine, and laughter teaches us. Comedy teaches us. We learn when we're able to sort of laugh at life and ourselves, and also it doesn't eliminate the importance of it. But I think we've sort of lost that a little bit in all the, bogged down difficulties we've had as a country and a world in the past decade. And I do think it's really important for kids to laugh, and I don't think they've been given enough to laugh about these days. So hopefully it will do exactly that.
So tell us a little bit about your other books. Do you have a favorite? I know it's like choosing a favorite child, but tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so Consider the Octopus is my 7th book. I have The Pull of Gravity, which was my first baby. That was with Frances Foster at FSG, and I'm super proud of it for many reasons, including that Frances Foster, who was a legend in the business, fell in love with it and took it on. She is no longer with us. I miss her all the time. And then Summer of Letting Go was my 2nd book. Both Pull of Gravity and Summer of Letting Go are sort of tween YA. They're very sweet YA. Although they tackle the same things that I tackle in almost all of my books, which are, how we cope with loss, how we forgive ourselves for the mistakes we make. There are similar themes that I tackle. And then Memory of Things came after Summer of Letting Go. That's my most well-known book, which takes place on 9/11 and in the days after in New York City. In Sight of Stars and Jack Kerouac is Dead to Me, which came after Memory of Things, started to be more upper YA, dealing with darker, more immediately serious issues for the protagonist, more young adult, upper. I even view them as upper YA crossover to adult titles. I really think In Sight of Stars is and should be and could be an adult title. It's My Boy Interrupted. It's about a boy who just has one too many terrible, difficult things pile on him, and he breaks, and he ends up committing an act of self-harm and ends up in patient rehab. And it's a story of recovery. And then after In Sight of Stars, Jack Kerouac is Dead to Me, which is my Mean Girls the fragility of female friendship book. In my head, I always thought of it as having a White Oleander type of tone, if anybody remembers White Oleander, even though it is nothing like the book. So to answer your question, those are my books, and then 7 Clues to Home and Consider the Octopus, which are middle grade. If you pushed me to choose favorites, and of course the answer is they're all my babies, and I hope different people love them for different reasons. And I love The Memory of Things because it's the book that put me on any map. And I think it's a beautiful book, but I think that The Summer of Letting Go for me is the book that when I hold it in my hands, I go, I can't believe I wrote this sweet little story that from start to finish, I'm intrigued by the story and want to read it and know what happens over and over again. And In Sight of Stars, I'm amazed at because I think it's my most beautiful writing. I just think the writing in Sight of Stars is beautiful. And the audio, if anybody hasn't read it and wants to read it and you do audiobooks, skip the written book and do Michael Crouch's narration of the audiobook because he elevates the story to a level that is just beyond.
Excellent.
So those two, if I had to choose.
We can link that on the blog. We can link I'm a big fan of audiobooks, especially for young readers. And I feel like I'm a very fast reader. And so oftentimes I will read just for the plot because I'm super excited to know this story. But audiobooks force me to slow down and savor the words. So I will definitely, I'll link that through the blog.
Thank you.
So tell me a little bit about what you hear from librarians and from your readers. Do you receive letters? And are there any that have stuck out to you?
I do receive letters, and I don't receive as many letters as some of the big authors, I'm sure, who get bombarded with letters. And so the letters that I do receive are incredibly meaningful for me. And still, I have a hard time holding on to them
Mhm.
because the business is so tough. And I'm always like, well, if my books aren't selling better, they must not be good enough. And then I remember, oh, this reader who reached out to me and told me that the book changed them or helped them. Or in the case of Inside of Stars, I've gotten a few readers who told me that the book saved their life or made them feel safe to go to therapy, which they didn't feel safe to do before. So I will say that probably because the memory of things is used in the most classrooms, that's where I get a lot of my readers who reach out to me the most. And I've had a few young male readers who have reached out to me over time and literally started their messages to me saying, I don't read, but I had to read The Memory of Things for
Yes.
school, and I really loved it. And so I just wanted to say hi or say thank you. And then I end up corresponding with them.
Mm.
And I offer to send them other books because it seems to me when they say they're not a reader, I might grab them some more. So I've sent some books to them, and some of them I stayed in touch with from the time they were in 8th or 9th grade. And now they're off doing whatever they're doing post high school or college. And I'm still in touch with some of those readers. And it's very, very meaningful.
This is a real audience for your writing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
Oh,
small,
that's so
but it's,
powerful to hear.
it's small, but it's me, but the books matter to them.
Yes.
And
And
those
it's
two things are hard to hold on to separately.
yes. And to know that you're the gateway book
Mm,
for a reader
mm.
is just astounding.
Back to the pull of gravity too.
Mhm.
I remember having several readers, especially young male readers, who said, I never read a book cover to cover
Yes.
until the pull of gravity. And I think part of the reason is that I can't always get myself to read a dense or wordy book. So I don't write dense. I write books that somehow are both literary and accessible.
Mhm.
And the and they're honest
Mhm.
and they're real. And I feel like that's what my readers kind of latch on to.
Mhm.
There's not pretense.
Mhm.
Um, and they're accessible, but they're not dumb. So
No.
it's yeah. So I think there's some of that.
There's there's something about your writing that definitely indicates to your readers that you're telling the truth
Thank
and
you.
that you believe that they can handle
Thank
the
you.
material that
Thank
you're
you.
going to be sharing.
That's one of the nicest things anybody's ever said to me.
Yes,
Thank
but it's
you.
true, right?
Thank
They can. They
Yeah.
can.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And they, even in the beginning of some of my books, like Inside of Stars, both Inside of Stars and Memory of Things, are tough openings because you don't know exactly where you are or what's going on. And a few of my readers will say, I was so confused in the beginning. And I say, yeah, so were my characters. That's okay. I wanted you to feel what they're feeling. I'm so glad you stuck with it.
mhm.
And I'm grateful to editors who didn't make me try to change that
Mhm.
or make it more easier. Well, they're not easy, but they are accessible because it's not dense writing. It's
Yeah.
spacious writing. There's a lot of space in my writing.
Yeah. What I want to ask just two more questions in this interview. But I'm wondering, in this age of books where we recognize the power of words, yet we're seeing books being censored or removed from classroom and community libraries, what are your thoughts on that? And have you faced that with your own books? And what advice would you give to teachers and librarians and community members? That's a long question, but just, initial thoughts.
Yeah, and there's also a lot of like different angles I feel to that. I mean,
Yes.
there's sort of a running joke amongst mid-list authors like me, like, please ban my book because there,
Oh,
you know,
right. I need the attention.
there is some
Right.
element that when your books get, but of course that's on an immediate author level, and on a bigger level, there's nothing funny about it, and there's nothing, you know, lighthearted about it. I've had, I haven't had any of my books banned. I've had them not used because of language.
Mhm.
And it's so interesting to me because of all the things kids are seeing in our world with the past president we had and the way he spoke, and
Mhm.
hate and name calling,
Mhm.
language, words used not even maliciously, just expressively, are the least of our problems, right? So that's always super frustrating to have someone say, well, we can't have your book in our school, or we can't use it because it has the F word in it, right? On the other hand, I respect that parents have a right to make decisions about what they feel their own children are comfortable with and not comfortable with. And I don't know how you balance those two things, because if it were just they're not ready for this, but when they are ready, I'm open to it,
Mhm.
then that would be a much more okay, understandable way to say, okay, not ready for a book yet, or I prefer them not to read it yet, but when they're ready, I'm open to that, versus people who just don't want certain things to be seen in books, which is ridiculous because it's out there everywhere else. And because no book has ever, you know, changed someone for, I don't think that I can think of any example of a book ever changing someone for the worse
Right.
versus opening them to understanding and empathy, and or helping them to just feel like what they're feeling is okay.
Mhm.
So I don't think that was a very good answer, but I just kind of don't get it. I mean, I can give you an example, and this always sticks with me. My older son, who's now 26, went to the library in second grade, and the kids, I guess, went to the library and picked out books, and he came home with a book, and in the book, it was a book about a soldier and somebody with PTSD, and it was a middle grade book, I guess, that he picked out because he was an advanced reader,
Mhm.
but it had someone who killed themselves in their
Yeah.
basement. And I remember calling the teacher and saying, oh my God, my kid can't read that at 7 or 8 years old.
Mhm.
And I do feel like as a parent, I had the right, I knew my child better than anyone, but it wasn't because I didn't eventually want him to understand and
Right.
empathize with people who, so, so I think it's a
A
hard,
not yet question
yes,
rather than a not
yes,
question.
yes,
Okay.
yes. And
Okay.
I think with everything, we're quick to make things very black and white and
Mhm.
very easy issues. And I almost think it would help us more to have an open conversation and say, what is it about this that is concerning you, and tackle it that way, instead of this sort of, we have sort of a knee-jerk reaction now to just be mad at anyone who doesn't want to be exposed to something without knowing what the possible reasons might be, or and whether they're not open to being exposed or just not ready to be exposed. And those two things could be different, but luckily it's not something that I have to tackle. And I would certainly respect a parent who said, I love your book, but my child is not ready to read that language. I myself would also think to myself, your child has heard that language since they were on the fifth grade, on the kindergarten bus. And I
Right.
know that, right? So
Right.
like, it's
Yeah.
hard. It's hard. That was a long answer, convoluted, but it's a hard issue.
It is.
But
Okay.
it's never hard to avail kids to books that they need that will help them. That
Yes.
is never a hard issue.
Yes. Well, and I have four daughters ranging. Well, I have an 18-year-old, which I can't believe I'm even saying, and then a 15-year-old and two 11-year-olds. I have four girls. 11-year-olds are twins. And it's interesting what they've chosen to read, and sometimes they'll choose things that I think, oh wow, okay. But if they're not ready to read that, they're likely not going to engage
Yes.
with that.
Yes.
You can't really force that engagement. And so I guess I just have trusted the process that they will gravitate towards what they're ready for and what kinds of questions they have in their mind. And I want them to trust themselves as readers, you
Yes.
know.
Yes. And I still don't know if my 7-year-old wouldn't have read the book and wouldn't have been ready for it, because
Sure.
he read everything in front of his. So I just don't,
Yeah.
I just think that there's so much complexity that we don't have the conversations for now.
Right.
There's
Exactly.
complexity
It's about
to
the
it.
conversation and
Yeah.
having that conversation with
It's all about the conversations for me.
Yeah.
Every issue we're dealing with in 2022 now, for me, is about the conversations. And the conversations seem so hard to have. And it seems so hard to have a conversation without fear of saying the wrong thing versus people knowing from a lifetime of humanity of who you are, that you're trying to have a conversation in the best light.
Yeah.
And I hope we can get back to a place where it's okay to have a conversation and ask questions and make mistakes and not be demonized for them. I think that will make the conversation stronger.
Yes. Okay, so is there anything that people don't ask you that you want to talk about? That's my last question for you.
So the quick answer is no. And I
Okay.
appreciate, you ask, I can't really think of questions that people don't ask me, because people ask great questions. But I really only want to talk about my talented kids. So if anybody wants to ask me about my singer-songwriter son and go stream his music,
Well,
that's
tell
what I
us about
basically.
that.
I'm going to show him this interview. He'll die.
We like to know that authors have other lives.
I have two amazing sons. One is getting his master's in music education. He's also a musician, talented musician pursuing education. So I'll have an educator in the family, which I'm super proud of. And my younger son just moved out to LA to pursue his music career, Holden Miller. And he is the most unbelievable songwriter. I do not know how he writes the lyrics that he writes. They are amazing. So ask me anytime you want about my kids. Holden Miller.
Holden Miller. Okay. And he's on YouTube?
He's on YouTube. He's on Spotify. He's on Apple Music, wherever music is
All
streamed.
right.
And he's a beautiful singer-songwriter.
Okay.
I'm so proud of him. And I like to think that he got his love of writing, albeit in a whole other form, from me, but he got his singing ability from his dad, because my husband is a very beautiful singer and taught both boys to love music. So
that's wonderful.
But I was mostly just being funny.
Well, yeah, of course. Well, and your dog didn't interrupt us either.
My dog did not. I exhausted him before the interview.
Yeah.
So he is. So,
oh yes, see, we love seeing pictures of pets. What kind of dog is that?
He is he's a Jackapoo, which is a cross between a Jack Russell and a toy poodle.
Oh wow. Okay, that sounds.
He's a handful.
Yes, that sounds really neat.
He's energetic and temperamental and smart and funny, and gives me exhausts me.
That's wonderful. And we love knowing that our authors have other lives and real lives and pets. And oftentimes that's what people ask, right? Is, are you married? Do you have kids? Do you have pets? So remind us again about your new book, the title, and when it's coming out, because I know our readers are going to be interested in buying it. So say the title again one more time and the date.
I will. It's called Consider the Octopus. and it comes out April 5th, just in time for Earth Day. And I definitely, and Nora and us together, separate together, do school visits and virtual visits, all
Wonderful.
of that. Please reach out to us. But an environmental farce coming from Henry Holt Macmillan on April 5th. So very, very excited about it. And I hope it makes readers laugh and also really want to get involved in saving the oceans and plastic pollution, and or whatever their passion is, just stepping up and knowing that it opens with a Greta Thunberg quote,
Yes.
and knowing that kids really can step up and make a huge difference in the world. I tell kids that all the time, and I know educators do as well.
Yes. Lovely. Thank you, Gay.
Thank you.
So
Thank you so
appreciative.
much for having me and the support for all of my books. I appreciate it.
Yes. Wonderful. Okay, I will post the book link on our YA Wednesday blog. And again, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.